The forensic team found Marcus Holloway's hiking boots still laced inside the grizzly bear's stomach, 8 years after he vanished, protecting his 12-year-old daughter Evelyn from what park rangers initially called a routine animal encounter. Wildlife biologists discovered his remains during a necropsy on a 847-pound male grizzly near Glacier National Park. The boots contained fragments of his driver's license, a piece of his wedding ring, and strands of gray hair that DNA testing confirmed belonged to the missing father. Marcus Holloway had spent 8 years being slowly digested by the same bear that killed him on June 14, 2016. Marcus was supposed to be teaching his daughter how to survive in the wilderness. Instead, he became the wilderness. The man who had hiked over 2,000 miles of Montana backcountry, who taught wilderness survival courses for the Boy Scouts, who could identify animal tracks in complete darkness, was reduced to undigested fragments inside a predator's digestive system. His daughter Evelyn watched the entire attack happen from inside their tent, where she remained hidden for 37 hours before park rangers found her. How does a survival expert become prey? How does a father's attempt to save his daughter turn into an 8-year mystery that ends with his bones being catalogued in a government lab? The answer lies in a single decision Marcus made at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night when he heard something that shouldn't have been there. The Holloway family had been camping at Bowman Lake for 3 days when Evelyn woke up to use the bathroom. She was 12 years old, weighed 92 pounds, and had been on camping trips with her father since she was 6. She knew the rules: never leave the tent alone after dark, always wake Dad first, always carry the whistle. But something was wrong with their campsite that night. The fire they had extinguished for hours earlier was smoking again, and there were deep claw marks gouged into the picnic table that hadn't been there when they went to sleep. Marcus found fresh grizzly scat 30 feet from their tent when he stepped outside with Evelyn. The droppings were still warm and contained pieces of undigested salmon, which meant the bear had been feeding recently and was likely still in the area. He immediately pushed his daughter back toward the tent and told her to zip herself inside the sleeping bag. He grabbed the bear spray from his backpack and started backing toward the tent himself. That's when the grizzly charged from behind a cluster of lodgepole pines 40 yards away. The bear covered 40 yards in 4 seconds. Marcus had enough time to discharge the bear spray once before. 847 pounds of muscle and claws hit him at 25 miles per hour. The impact threw him 8 feet backward into a Douglas fir tree, breaking 3 ribs and dislocating his left shoulder. But Marcus Holloway didn't scream. He didn't call for help. Instead, he did something that survival experts say was either the bravest or most foolish thing possible. He started running away from the tent where his daughter was hiding. Evelyn watched through a gap in the tent zipper as her father sprinted toward the lake with the grizzly pursuing him. She could hear his footsteps hitting the rocky shoreline, then splashing into the water. The bear followed him into Bowman Lake, where the water temperature was 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Marcus managed to swim approximately 60 yards from shore before the grizzly caught him. The attack happened in complete darkness, but Evelyn could hear everything: the splashing, the roaring, and then silence. She waited in the tent for 37 hours. She had 2 granola bars, a half-empty water bottle, and her father's emergency whistle, but she never used it. Park rangers later found her sitting in the exact same position where her father had left her, still zipped inside the sleeping bag, still waiting for him to come back. When they asked why she hadn't called for help, she said her father told her to stay hidden until morning, and it wasn't morning yet. The search for Marcus Holloway lasted for months and involved 68 park rangers, 2 helicopters, and search dogs from 3 different states. They found pieces of his torn clothing along the lakeshore, blood evidence in the water, and massive claw marks on several trees, but no body. The official report classified him as presumed dead due to bear attack, and the case was filed away, with dozens of other missing persons cases from Glacier National Park. But the grizzly that killed Marcus Holloway was still alive. Wildlife biologists had been tracking the same bear for 12 years using GPS, collar data, and identifying him by a distinctive scar across his snout from an encounter with another male grizzly in 2011. They called him Bear 274, and he weighed 623 pounds when Marcus Holloway died. By 2024, he had grown to 847 pounds and had become increasingly aggressive toward humans, forcing park officials to make the decision to euthanize him after he destroyed 3 campsites in 2 weeks. The necropsy on Bear 274 was supposed to be routine. Wildlife biologists regularly examine euthanized bears to study their diet, health, and impact on local ecosystems. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the lead biologist, expected to find the usual contents: fish bones, berries, small mammals, maybe some camping gear that the bear had scavenged. Instead, she found a hiking boot with a foot still inside it. The boot was a size 11 Merrell hiking shoe with Marcus Holloway's driver's license stuffed inside it, waterproof pouch in the tongue. The leather was intact but stained dark brown from 8 years of stomach acid. Inside the boot was a human foot with all 5 toes, preserved by the acidic environment of the bear's digestive system. DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Marcus Holloway within 72 hours. Bear 274 had been carrying pieces of Marcus Holloway inside his stomach for 8 years. The stomach of a grizzly bear is extremely acidic, with a pH level between 1.5 and 2.0, which is strong enough to dissolve most organic matter within weeks. But certain materials resist acid digestion: leather, synthetic fabrics, metal, and dense bone fragments. The bear had been walking around with a museum of Marcus Holloway's final moments preserved inside his digestive tract. The forensic team found additional items during the full necropsy: a piece of Marcus's wedding ring engraved with the date Juni 12, 1998, fragments of his nylon hiking pants with his name written in permanent marker on the waistband, and small pieces of bone that DNA testing confirmed came from his ribcage. They also found something that made the investigation take a disturbing turn: fresh human DNA that didn't belong to Marcus Holloway. Bear 274 had killed at least one other person since 2016. The DNA evidence suggested the bear had consumed human remains within the past 6 months, but there were no recent missing persons reports from Glacier National Park. This meant either someone had died and hadn't been reported missing yet, or Bear 274 had been traveling outside park boundaries to hunt humans. Wildlife biologists immediately began reviewing 8 years of GPS collar data to track everywhere the bear had been. The GPS data revealed that Bear 274 had traveled over 340 miles since killing Marcus Holloway, crossing state lines into Idaho and Canada multiple times. He had spent the winter of 2019 in a den located only 12 miles from a small town called Polebridge, Montana, population 87 people. He had returned to the same area around Bowman Lake every summer for 8 years, as if he was drawn back to the location where he first killed a human. Evelyn Holloway was 20 years old when park rangers called to tell her they had found her father's remains. She was a junior at Montana State University studying wildlife biology, the same field as the scientists who had discovered her father's boots. She had spent 8 years believing that her father's body was somewhere at the bottom of Bowman Lake, and that his sacrifice had saved her life. Learning that he had been carried around inside the bear that killed him changed everything. She requested to see the bear's GPS tracking data and spent weeks studying his movement patterns. Bear 274 had returned to their campsite at Bowman Lake every summer on almost the exact same date, June 14th. He had been coming back to the anniversary of his first human kill for 8 consecutive years. Wildlife biologists had never seen this behavior before, but Evelyn understood what it meant. The bear had been waiting for her to come back. The final piece of evidence came from Bear 274's collar data from June 14, 2024, exactly 8 years after he killed Marcus Holloway. The bear had spent 6 hours at the exact location where their tent had been set up, moving in circles around the abandoned campsite. He had dug holes in the ground where their sleeping bags had been positioned. He had clawed at the trees where Marcus had hung their food storage. He was looking for the 12-year-old girl who had hidden in the tent while he killed her father. Evelyn realized that her father hadn't just died protecting her from a random bear attack. He had died protecting her from a predator that had specifically targeted their family and had been hunting her for 8 years. Bear 274 wasn't just a wild animal defending territory or searching for food. He had developed a taste for human flesh and had been returning to the same location every year, waiting for the one human who had escaped him. The necropsy revealed that Bear 274's teeth contained traces of human DNA from at least 4 different people, suggesting he had killed multiple humans over his lifetime. His stomach contents included pieces of modern camping equipment, tent fabric, sleeping bag insulation, and hiking gear that could only have come from human campsites. Wildlife biologists concluded that Bear 274 had been systematically hunting humans for over a decade, using the remote areas of Glacier National Park as his territory. Marcus Holloway had saved his daughter's life by leading the bear away from their tent, but he had also created something much worse: a man-eating grizzly that spent 8 years carrying his remains while hunting for his next victim. The bear that killed him had grown 224 pounds larger by consuming human flesh, had become increasingly aggressive toward people, and had developed hunting patterns specifically designed to target families camping in remote areas. Evelyn learned that 3 other families had reported close encounters with an unusually large grizzly near Bowman Lake between 2016 and 2024. In each case, the bear had approached their campsite after dark and had shown no fear of humans or loud noises. Park rangers had responded to these reports by temporarily closing camping areas, but they had never connected these incidents to Marcus Holloway's death. They had been dealing with the same killer bear for 8 years without realizing it. DNA evidence from Bear 274's teeth matched genetic material from 2 missing persons cases in Montana: Jennifer Chen, a 26-year-old photographer who vanished near Lake McDonald in 2021, and Robert Martinez, a 43-year-old geology professor who disappeared while conducting research in the park in 2023. Neither body had ever been found, but both had been classified as probable bear attacks based on blood evidence and torn camping equipment found at their last known locations. Bear 274 had killed at least 4 people over 8 years. and Marcus Holloway was just the first. The bear had learned that humans were easier prey than elk or deer, that they camped in predictable locations, and that they traveled in small groups that could be separated and attacked individually. He had become a serial killer with fur and claws, using Glacier National Park as his hunting ground. The Park Service immediately closed all backcountry camping areas within a 50-mile radius of Bear 274's territory and launched a comprehensive review of every unsolved missing persons case from the past decade. They found evidence connecting the bear to 6 additional disappearances, including a family of 3 who vanished while hiking the Continental Divide Trail in 2018. Their campsite had been destroyed, their food scattered, and their bodies never recovered. Marcus Holloway died believing he was protecting his daughter from a single bear attack. He couldn't have known that he was actually protecting her from becoming the first victim of a predator that would go on to kill at least 7 more people. His sacrifice didn't just save Evelyn's life that night in 2016, it prevented her from becoming part of an 8-year killing spree that only ended when wildlife biologists finally connected the dots between a routine necropsy and a series of unsolved disappearances. The hiking boots that contained Marcus Holloway's driver's license are now stored in an evidence locker at the Montana State Crime Lab. The leather is still intact. The laces still tied the way he left them 8 years ago when he put them on, for what he thought would be a routine camping trip with his daughter. Inside those boots are the preserved remains of a father who ran toward danger instead of away from it, who chose to become prey so his daughter could remain hidden. The investigation into Bear 274's killing spree revealed a pattern that wildlife experts had never documented before. The bear's GPS collar showed that he had developed specific hunting strategies for different types of human prey. Solo hikers were attacked during daylight hours along remote trails, always at locations more than 5 miles from the nearest road. Families with children were targeted at night in established campsites, with the bear approaching from downwind to avoid detection by dogs or experienced campers. Dr. Walsh's forensic analysis of Bear 274's stomach contents revealed something even more disturbing than human remains. The bear had been consuming synthetic materials from camping gear for years. His digestive system contained fragments of 17 different tents, pieces of sleeping bags from at least 12 manufacturers, and camping stove components that could be traced to specific outdoor equipment retailers. This meant Bear 207 hadn't just been killing humans randomly, he had been systematically destroying campsites and consuming everything inside them. The bear's collar data showed he had visited over 200 campsites between 2016 and 2024, but only attacked at locations that met specific criteria. Campsites occupied by 3 or fewer people, positioned more than 2 miles from park ranger stations, and accessible only by hiking trails rather than vehicle access roads. He had been scouting human activity patterns and selecting victims based on their vulnerability and isolation. Wildlife biologists discovered that Bear 274's behavior had been influenced by climate change in ways they never anticipated. Rising temperatures had disrupted the bear's natural food sources, forcing him to seek alternative nutrition. Salmon runs had decreased by 40% in the region since 2010, and berry crops had become unpredictable due to shifting weather patterns. The bear had initially turned to human garbage as a food source, but had eventually learned that humans themselves were easier to catch than the fish and game that were becoming scarce. The necropsy revealed that Bear 274's brain showed unusual development in the regions associated with memory and spatial reasoning. His hippocampus was 30% larger than normal for a grizzly bear his age, suggesting that his ability to remember human locations and behavior patterns had been enhanced by years of hunting people. He had literally evolved into a more intelligent predator by specializing in human prey. Park rangers discovered that Bear 274 had been using human trails as hunting corridors for years. His GPS data showed he traveled exclusively on established hiking paths, avoiding wilderness areas where humans rarely ventured. He had learned that following human-made trails was the most efficient way to encounter prey, and had developed the ability to predict where hikers would camp based on factors like water sources, elevation, and distance from trailheads. The bear's killing methods had also evolved over time. Marcus Holloway's death in 2016 showed signs of a chaotic, aggressive attack. The bear had used brute force and overwhelming size to kill his victim, but forensic evidence from later victims revealed increasingly sophisticated techniques. Jennifer Chen's remains, found scattered near Lake McDonald, showed that Bear 274 had learned to target the neck and spine for quicker kills. Robert Martinez's campsite indicated the bear had waited for the victim to fall asleep before attacking, suggesting he had developed patience and tactical thinking. Dr. Walsh's team discovered that Bear 274's teeth contained microscopic traces of human DNA from at least 9 different individuals, more than double their initial estimate. Some of this genetic material came from people who had never been reported missing, suggesting the bear had killed hikers whose disappearances had been attributed to other causes like getting lost, falling from cliffs, or drowning in mountain lakes. The Montana State Crime Lab began re-examining every unexplained disappearance in Glacier National Park dating back to 2010, they found 13 cases that shared common elements with confirmed Bear 274 attacks, missing persons last seen in remote camping areas, torn camping equipment found at abandoned campsites, and large animal tracks in the vicinity that rangers had attributed to normal bear activity rather than predatory behavior. One case stood out from the others: the disappearance of the Kowalski family in August 2017. David and Linda Kowalski had been camping with their 8-year-old son Tyler near Logging Lake when their tent was found shredded and bloody, with no trace of the family. Park rangers had concluded they were killed by a bear, but their bodies were never recovered. Bear 274's GPS collar showed he had been within half a mile of their campsite on the night they disappeared. The forensic team found fragments of children's clothing in Bear 274's stomach, including pieces of a superhero t-shirt that matched the description of what Tyler Kowalski had been wearing when his family vanished. DNA testing confirmed the material belonged to the missing 8-year-old boy. Bear 274 had been carrying pieces of Tyler Kowalski inside his digestive system for 7 years. This discovery led to a horrifying realization. Bear 274 had been killing entire families and consuming their remains so completely that no trace remained for search teams to find. Traditional bear attacks leave evidence: scattered camping gear, claw marks on trees, and usually some human remains that bears abandon after feeding. But Bear 274 had been eating everything, including clothing, camping equipment, and human bones, leaving nothing behind for investigators to discover. The bear's unusual digestive capabilities became the focus of additional research. Normal grizzly bears have powerful stomach acid, but Bear 274's digestive system had adapted to process materials that most bears cannot break down. His stomach lining was thicker than normal, his intestinal tract was longer, and his jaw muscles were overdeveloped from years of chewing synthetic camping materials. He had physically evolved to become a more efficient consumer of human prey and their belongings. Wildlife experts realized that Bear 274 represented a new category of problem animal that existing park protocols weren't designed to handle. Traditional bear management focuses on preventing habituation to human food sources and relocating bears that become aggressive. But Bear 274 had moved beyond habituation to human food. He had developed a preference for human flesh and had been actively hunting people as his primary food source. The GPS collar data revealed that Bear 274's territory had been expanding each year as he became more confident in his ability to kill humans. In 2016, his range was approximately 50 square miles centered around Bowman Lake. By 2024, he was traveling across more than 300 square miles and had made incursions into populated areas near Whitefish and Kalispell, Montana. He had been moving closer to towns and developed areas as wilderness prey became scarce. Park officials discovered that Bear 274 had been observed by multiple visitors over the years, but these sightings had been dismissed as normal bear activity. Hikers had reported seeing an unusually large grizzly bear following their groups from a distance, watching campsites from tree lines, and appearing at multiple locations along the same trail system. Rangers had interpreted these reports as evidence of a curious but harmless bear, not recognizing the stalking behavior of a serial predator. The investigation revealed that Bear 274's collar had malfunctioned for 6 months in 2020, creating a gap in the GPS tracking data during which 3 hikers disappeared in the region. When the collar resumed transmitting, the bear had gained 68 pounds and had extended his territory into areas he had never previously visited. Wildlife biologists now believe this was when Bear 274 learned that he could kill humans in other locations without being detected by park monitoring systems. Dr. Walsh's final report on Bear 274 included recommendations for identifying similar predatory behavior in other bears before they developed into serial killers. The warning signs included GPS collar data showing repeated visits to human campsites, unusual weight gain that couldn't be explained by seasonal feeding patterns, and reports from park visitors about bears that appeared to be following or watching human groups rather than avoiding them. The National Park Service has implemented new protocols based on the Bear 274 investigation. GPS collars on problem bears now trigger automatic alerts when the animals spend more than 4 hours within 200 yards of established campsites. Rangers receive real-time notifications when collared bears deviate from normal movement patterns or appear to be tracking human groups. Campsites in remote areas now require permits that include detailed safety briefings about predatory bear behavior. Evelyn Holloway requested to be present when Bear 274's remains were cremated after the forensic investigation was completed. She watched as the 847-pound carcass was reduced to ash, finally ending the life of the predator that had when carrying her father's remains for 8 years. She scattered the bear's ashes in an undisclosed location outside Glacier National Park, ensuring that no part of the serial killer would remain in the wilderness where he had hunted her family. The hiking boots that contained Marcus Holloway's foot are now part of a permanent display at the National Park Service's Bear Management Training Center in Yellowstone. Rangers from across the country study the case as an example of how quickly bears can develop predatory behavior toward humans and how traditional wildlife management approaches can fail when dealing with serial killer animals. Evelyn Holloway graduated with a degree in wildlife biology and now works for the National Park Service, developing protocols to identify and track potentially dangerous bears before they become serial killers. She has never returned to Bowman Lake, but she carries her father's emergency whistle on every backcountry assignment. The whistle he told her not to use, the one that might have saved his life if she had blown it 8 years ago when she watched him disappear into the darkness of a Montana lake, carrying a killer bear away from her tent and into a story that wouldn't end until 2024. She keeps a photograph of Bear 274 in her office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the wilderness contains predators that can think, plan, and remember. The bear in the photograph weighs 847 pounds and has Marcus Holloway's hiking boots in his stomach. He has been dead for 6 months, but Evelyn still checks the locks on her doors every night before going to sleep. Because somewhere in the mountains of Montana, there might be another bear learning that humans make easy prey, developing a taste for synthetic tent fabric and human flesh, growing larger and smarter with every kill.